Today on the Inner Edge, we're joined by someone who has spent his life straddling worlds, technology and the Torah, leadership and service, America and Israel. Paul Bloom is a former executive director at Bell Labs and CTO at IBM Research with a background in electrical engineering, control theory and statistics, and a smicha to boot. So he's helped build the future in the corporate world and build Jewish communities in the spiritual world. Born in Brooklyn and now living in Yerushalayim, Paul made Aliyah over 4 years ago, but his story began much earlier with a passion for Eretz Yisrael that led him to organize a chabura in New Jersey that helped over 70 families buy homes in Israel. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of that.
No, you're absolutely right. And out of those 70, I would say, as of now, about half of them made Aliyah. Grew up in Brooklyn. I went to public school for my first 6 years. And then I went to a school called Ezra Academy, which was kind of like a transition from public school to a yeshiva. I went to a very good Talmud Torah in Brooklyn. And I was influenced by some of the Rebbeim there who convinced me to go, instead of going to Brooklyn Tech, which was one of my first choices as far as going to a high school, it's going to this Ezra Academy, which then eventually let me go, drove me to go to the Yeshiva University High School. And I didn't go to Israel until I graduated college at Brooklyn Poly in 1972. And I had the interesting opportunity to spend 8 weeks living in Meah Shearim.
Oh, wow.
So I got a very different exposure to Eretz Yisrael than most people did. But I would say that my real love for Eretz Yisrael kind of came during my working period when I had opportunities to meet with Israeli companies in Eretz Yisrael. And I started to get a taste of the land at that point in time. Oh, the transition was very, very simple. Because I was actually working with some of the people from IBM, and they wanted to start a telecommunication practice within IBM. And they gave me the opportunity to kind of lead some of the groups there.
Wow.
So it was a very, very easy transition.
Amazing.
And it was really excellent for me because at Bell Laboratories, I was traveling most around the United States. But at IBM, I was traveling globally. And it was amazing how every time I would go to Asia or to Europe or to Africa, I always found a cheaper flight to stop off in Eretz Yisrael. So it was one of those nisim that occurred that, so anytime I would travel, I would end up in Eretz Yisrael. And I had kids there already going to yeshivas and going to seminaries, so I used that opportunity to spend the Shabbos for a week with them while I was doing my travel.
Can you talk a little bit about what inspired then? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I was having a discussion with some people, and they kept on saying, people tell me to go to Israel because things are so bad here in the United States. And I said, you don't want to go to Israel because you're running away from something. You want to run to something. And so I said, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put together a set of reasons of why you should go to Eretz Yisrael, not run away from America. And I think America is really a wonderful place for Jews to be, but Eretz Yisrael is where Jews really belong. We were sent into Golus 2,000 years ago as a punishment. And it's a very comfortable punishment living here in the United States, but it's still a punishment. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do is really to take a look at ourselves and take a look at our forefathers and take a look at our learnings and our prayers to recognize where we really belong is Eretz Yisrael. Wow. So these 100 reasons to make Aliyah came from the view that we need to really inspire people to consider Aliyah as part of their future. And making a transition from the United States or Europe to Eretz Yisrael is a very big transition. And especially if you're kind of mid-career and you have kids going to school in high school or either in middle school, that transition for the family can be very difficult. And I think what has happened over the years is that the institutions in Eretz Yisrael recognize the difficulty, and they're now creating environments to make it easier for that transition from the Golus mentality to Eretz Yisrael, taking kids who maybe don't know the language so well and integrating them into the Israeli culture. Right. Spend time understanding what community you want to consider moving to. And there's virtually every single type of Jewish community in Eretz Yisrael, from very much Haredi communities to very secular communities, for kibbutz life to city life. And everyone has different interests. And you have to know yourself and say, okay, where do I really want to be? What do I really want to do when I grow up? And once you've kind of decided what type of community you want, then you can identify probably a dozen or so different types of communities. And it's really important for you to go to those communities, spend some time there, and really understand what does it mean to live in this community. You get a very different view. People they would visit Eretz Yisrael and go to a certain neighborhood and spend a day or two. But you really don't get an appreciation of that neighborhood until you really spend some quality time within that neighborhood. So you need to take it slow. You need to kind of understand what you want, where you want to go, what type of career you want to have, depending on what stage of life you are. So you take a very different view if you're just coming out of school and you don't have any ties in a particular diaspora community than you would if you're retired, which would be very different than if you're mid-career and you do have kids at a certain age where you know that transition will be somewhat difficult to go from an American high school or middle school to an Israeli school. And then kind of take a look at all those points that you put together and kind of make a decision. Don't jump, but take a look at the information around you and use that information to help you take the next step. And people who take one large step typically are not very successful in Aliyah. It's those people who are taking smaller steps, understanding the implications of the decision that they're going to make on themselves and on their family and on their future, are the ones who are going to be very successful in making Aliyah.
Wow. It's incredible.
Which makes a really big difference, because a lot of mitzvahs that are midrabanan kind of turn over, become midoraisa, become Torah-bound mitzvahs, once you have more than 50% of the Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. I was there on October 7th. I was there when the Iranians were, the 3 times the Iranians were throwing bombs and missiles in Eretz Yisrael, and you kind of see the miracles around you. You hear stories that you know are true because you're hearing from people that it happened to. You see what happened at the hospital, where the day before they took out an entire ward, and that was one of the buildings that was hit.
Wow.
Every day you see miracles. The prophecies that our Nevi'im talk about are kind of happening in front of our eyes. And many people don't see that.
Right.
And that's kind of the sad thing. It's true that the IDF is a very strong, well-organized army, but it's really the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is directing the IDF and the leaders of Eretz Yisrael to have these tremendous miracles that have been going on in the past year and a half. Well, number one, you don't have to drop all that. You can get the same Gashmias in Eretz Yisrael that you can get here. But the advantage of being in Eretz Yisrael, you get the real Ruchnias together with the Gashmias.
Wow.
So you have a very interesting combination. There are beautiful homes in Eretz Yisrael. There are wonderful jobs. You look around, you see Teslas all over the place in Eretz Yisrael. So your lifestyle will be different, but you're not going from a first world country to a third world country. You're going from a first world country to another first world country.
Wow.
So all the things that you have here in the United States, you will have also in Eretz Yisrael. Yes, your house will probably, depending on where you live.
Right.
But it's 4 bedrooms. I could have made it to 5 bedrooms. It's a very comfortable living that I find it anyway. So you're really not giving up a lot. Yes, it's going to be different, but I find all the differences to be very positive, both from a Ruchni's perspective, from a learning perspective, from the environment. As I mentioned earlier, you're engrossed in Yiddishkeit. When it's a Chag, you know it's a Chag, and you feel it. And that's why it's so important. If you're going to really think about it, you don't have to make Aliyah, but make that investment as early as you can. I know what I did. I took a second mortgage on my house here, and I used that money to buy my house in Eretz Yisrael.
For somebody who doesn't have that kind of a portfolio or income or investment or savings, you would recommend to just rent?
There's no reason why you can't rent.
Right.
You can get beautiful apartments. Renting is much more affordable than it is here in the United States, and there's nothing wrong with that. No one knows if you're renting a 3-bedroom apartment in Rechavia versus if you bought a 3-bedroom, that same 3-bedroom apartment. Well, Nefesh B'Nefesh will help you with your paperwork. And there are many organizations throughout Eretz Yisrael, Chaim V'Chesed, Olim Advisors, a lot of organizations like that will help you in your transition. So you shouldn't feel that you're going to be left alone after you finish all the paperwork and make Aliyah. There are many organizations. That's one of the really nice things, that not only there are organizations, but virtually everyone in Eretz Yisrael wants you to come, and they're going to help you come. So don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. So ask, do your planning. Think about where you want to live. Think about, if you have younger children, what type of education you want them to have, what type of hashkafa you have, because that'll determine the type of neighborhood that you're looking at. Look for different jobs. There are different organizations within Eretz Yisrael that actually help Olim find jobs in their particular field. So I think the key thing is planning, finding people and organizations who are going to help you do that planning. And your plan could be 1 year, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. But you can start that process now. And there's no reason not to start the planning process. You don't have to make a decision, you don't have to invest, but start the planning process and really understand the impact of each of your decisions, because the impact will be so positive, not only yourself, but your children and your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. Our grandparents didn't have the opportunity to see Eretz Yisrael. Some have come from the Arab countries. They never in their wild dreams would they have thought that they would have been able to come to Eretz Yisrael and live in a country that is so modern, yet is so traditional.
That's amazing.
That kind of meets their gashmias needs as well as their spiritual needs. And there's a beautiful blending in Eretz Yisrael of those two areas.